program it's an app that with a reward program that was considered to be highly addictive. Cases were also opened against Facebook and Instagram because of suspicions that these platforms have a negative influence on the well-being of minors and stimulate addictive behavior. Second, the fight against illegal content. We have opened investigations against X, Facebook and Instagram, for instance concerning the flagging mechanism for illegal content or their relationship with trusted flaggers. Third, online advertising is banned when it comes to the profiling of minors or when sensitive data is concerned. As a result of our enforcement work, LinkedIn has changed its systems. Fourth, we have taken measures to secure online marketplaces. We have designated no less than 9 marketplaces, and we have already opened formal investigations against AliExpress. And in addition, requests for information are being sent to both Temu and Shein. Finally, regarding election integrity and civic discourse, the Commission issued guidelines in March this year on the mitigation of those risks, and we have held stress tests with platforms and authorities under the Code of Practice on Disinformation. No major anomalies were observed during the elections for this Parliament. All democratic societies around this world, well, they are faced with the same risks stemming from digital technologies. Based on our experience, this month's G20 declaration for the first time refers to content moderation and the responsibility of online platforms. UNESCO's guidelines for the governance of digital platforms, the UN principles for information integrity, or the OECD AI principles and recommendations, as I see it, they are directly inspired by the laws that this Parliament has passed. So, in conclusion, the Digital Services Act is an unprecedented regulatory framework based on the founding values of this very union. These are human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and the respect of human rights. And contrary to deliberate misunderstandings of this piece of legislation, it does not regulate content. It does not restrict free speech. All of our enforcement work is based on the rule of law, following due process, and it has consistently been upheld by the Court of Justice. Looking forward, the guidelines for the next Commission identify 3 priorities for future work: to intensify the enforcement of the Digital Services Act, including the support of the European Democracy Shield, protecting our elections and our democratic system. And of course, as an outgoing commissioner, I hope that they will have the resources to do so. Also, to tackle challenges with e-commerce platforms to ensure that our customs and our market surveillance authorities can fully fulfill their duties. And thirdly, to make the online world safer for children. We will carefully look into issues such as online addiction or cyberbullying. This Parliament has taken the most important and decisive step. Now it's time for enforcement. It's time for platforms to show that they respect and comply with this piece of amazing legislation. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hearing your views and answering your questions.
Grazie a lei, Vicepresidente.
Thank you very much, Vice President. The next speaker is Mr. Schwab.
Prego.
Frau Präsidentin. Thank you very much, Madam President, Vice President of the European Commission. Now, it's good that you mentioned at the end of your speech that here in the European Parliament, together with Christel Schaldemose, we adopted the DSA and the DMA, and we set out the right milestones. Now, it's important to focus on implementation, of course, but implementing laws requires pressure. We need to act more swiftly. We've learned in Brussels, in the European Parliament, that the Chinese platform, within 6 months, has as many customers in Europe as a European platform over the past 6 years. So this shows just how quickly things are developing in the digital age and just how slow our reactions are to that. So, Commissioner, it is very important to speed up implementation, and the new Commission must do this to put more staff into it as well. And this has been shown in the DSA. This needs to be dealt with successfully in all areas. There are a whole number of issues that people have mentioned: protecting young people, protecting democracy, and this will be very important in the formation of the new Commission. But today I would like to focus on the online markets, because I think we have seen from history this is where we can make it most clear where the problems are. Tmall from China, that platform, many products enter Europe with privileged customs rules, and then they are competing with European products which are manufactured under different conditions, and this distorts market conditions. National customs authorities and the European Commission need to work closer together to ensure that European law is not just something on paper, but that also is applied. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwab. Dear colleagues, we have a very long debate. This is the first time I am chairing such a debate. I extend my compassion for the victims of the floods throughout Europe. And I give the floor to Mr. Alius Saliba, 2.5 minutes, on behalf of the Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament.
Social media is by far the most significantly and widely used form of mass media in our modern society. Undoubtedly, social media holds immense potential as a unifying force, fostering communities and bringing people together. Despite this, it is often misused to spread fake news and propaganda, and to manipulate and target people towards a particular way of thinking, which is aimed at destabilising modern democratic processes and societies. We increasingly see malicious motives and dishonest rhetoric from powerful, influential people using social media's ability to circulate and disperse both information and also disinformation. The recent wave of violent riots in the UK after the spread of misinformation online, and Elon Musk's decision not to comply with Brazilian court orders leading to the blocking of X in the country, are other examples of how tech giants are increasingly behaving with impunity before governments and before our courts. It is not the first time that lies, that hate, spread on digital platforms are sparking and fueling violence or changing the course of elections in countries around the world, even in Europe. A recent report commissioned by the S&D Group clearly shows that coordinated disinformation networks flooded X before the EU elections in France, in Germany, in Italy. The scale of disinformation networks shows they could and did take over an entire debate, changing its narrative completely by flooding X with posts, reposts, comments and likes. Social media companies need to be held more accountable for spreading disinformation. The Digital Services Act represents the EU's first step in protecting ourselves against the spread of misinformation and preserving our democracies from such influence. However, the effectiveness of the DSA hinges on robust enforcement and a firm commitment from the new Commission. We need assurance that the multi-million euro fines under the DSA will be used to to rein in social media companies that break the law and exploit our democracies. Last but not least, it's crucial to acknowledge that we cannot combat the issue in isolation. The S&D Group strongly advocates for the EU to strengthen the global roles of the DSA and heed the UN Secretary-General's call for global measures to safeguard our democracies from digital chaos that social media platforms have unleashed. Thanks a lot.
Mulțumim. În numele grupului
Thank you. In the name of the Patriots for Europe group, Mrs. Virginie Joron, 1.5 minutes.
Président, Madame la Commissaire.
President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, DSA, Digital Service Act or Digital Surveillance Act, the person who helped Goldman Sachs hide what was doing in Greece. Now look at what is happening, what happened in France, the arresting the head of Telegram and so on and so forth. There are people talking about economic suicide. Commissioner Breton is sending missiles to Elon Musk, and he resigned yesterday, which means he will not be held accountable by MEPs. He won't be able to explain what he's been doing, and the pretext is that we're protecting European citizens. Who are we protecting the citizens from? Freedom of thought, the freedom to think differently. I've never heard the word disinformation bandied about so much as today. It's all about fighting disinformation. The European Parliament also wants us to keep Telegram in check. We also, what happened with vaccines in the past, and the Meta director called this into question, having to toe the government's line. You are trying to keep something that is dying alive. We're talking about billions of euro, and this plan won't go along, but maybe that's what is so fraudulent about the whole thing.
În numele grupului conservator.
Thank you. For the European Conservatives and Reformists, Mr. Piotr Müller. 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Szanowni Państwo, słowo cenzura.
President, colleagues, the word censure brings in mind a number of different things, some of them absolutely terrible and completely far removed from democracy. In Central and Eastern Europe, we have seen terrible events. And yet we should be talking about democracy, meaning the freedom of expression, including freedom of expression on the internet. And this is why we need to look very closely at what the European Commission is doing and what the social media networks are doing in the context of the DSA. The objective is to protect democratic societies against potentially malevolent attempts to exert influence on them. Commissioner Breton was in charge of the implementation of this package. He has, of course, resigned from the Commission. But that notwithstanding, this preventive censure approach is something which is very problematic. As I said, we've seen this in Central and Eastern Europe. And once again, we see that preventive censure has come to the fore. And should we not rather be focusing on how to address the real dangers here? We need to pause and reflect on who should be evaluating the dangers. Is it right to be able to criticise the migration package, or is that hate speech? Is it a legitimate part of public discourse? What about Germany closing its borders? We didn't read Orwell, colleagues, to stand idly by here and now and not look at what is going on in the realms of justice.
Thank you. For the Renew Europe group, Mrs. Svenjahan, 1 minute and a half.
Danke, Kommissarin Vestager.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Vestager, for all of your work and for your clear approach, because freedom of opinion is one of the key achievements of our democracy, that freedom of thought that differentiates us from autocracies. So do not be misled by the right-wing populists here. The DSA is combating illegal content, and it is about implementing things that are done offline, online. But this will not be the only way of dealing with disinformation and hate online, because we still have this autocracy versus democracy problem in the world, and there are still countries like Russia and China that want to confuse us and that want to weaken our and poison our democracies and societies. So we need to hold social media platforms responsible under the DSA. They need to tackle disinformation, and they need to implement these laws without hesitation. But this, after all, is a task for the whole of society to combat these things. We need to defend our democracies, and the keys to this are raising awareness, media literacy, and education. We need to focus on raising awareness so that we can combat the poisonous disinformation that is ongoing and defend our values together. Thank you.
Thank you. For the Greens, Green Free Alliance, Alexandra Giese, 2 minutes.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident, Frau Kommissarin.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, colleagues, yesterday, Meta actually banned Putin's propaganda channel. It has been sanctioned for a long time in many places here, but it's taken a long time for Meta to realize it had to relinquish some of its profits because this was simply a method of disseminating Russian propaganda. Now, there has been a lot said about freedom of expression here this week. We've heard that the Russian agency was instrumental in the results which emerged from the German elections in the last week or two. So you can see what freedom of expression means to Putin. But why is this such a powerful concept? It's something which has been around for a long time, and it was not unknown in the Soviet Union. But now we're talking about TikTok, Google, YouTube, Meta. They all have their own algorithms, and they're all responsible for disseminating all kinds of hate speech and amplifying it much further than any democratic politician or individual would be able to do. And therefore, we need to bring this under control. It's an aberration, and we need to bring it under control to stop it endangering our children. It is something which is becoming endemic in society. It's good to have access to digital platforms, but it doesn't mean that using them is only giving voice to free expression of views. Platforms are often simply disseminating extremist views, lies, hate speech, exploiting people. And at this point, it becomes impossible to have any genuine democracy anymore. We do need algorithms in a democracy only if they can give everybody free and equal access to the world of free expression and to what comes into their inboxes and into their feeds. That is proper freedom of expression. That's what we're fighting for. Thank you.
Thank you. For the left, Mrs. Gallan.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner. In July, the European Commission denounced the fact that the DSA was breached by X. Elon Musk replied by insulting the European Commission. Madam Commissioner, how long is it going to take us for how long are we going to continue using a platform that violates EU law? Social networks have become a Wild West where anything goes. Hiding behind the pretext of freedom of expression. In these platforms, there can be hatred, hoaxes, without any punishment whatsoever. Are we going to continue allowing this? They're promoting xenophobia, male chauvinism, and so much more. And this is greatly affecting our social cohesion and the mental health of many of our youngsters who are the most vulnerable in this case. There's consensus to put an end to racism racism, homophobia at the workplace, in our neighborhoods and schools. So if there's consensus there, I'd like to think that there would be a democratic majority in this House that would want social networks and social media that are free of discrimination and xenophobia. We must put an end to the slippery slope. The European Commission has to take measures to ensure that online platforms respect the law. We have to strengthen European digital sovereignty. We need platforms that work in a transparent and democratic manner that don't serve private interests and the ideologies of their owners. Thank you.
Mulțumim. În numele
Thank you, colleague. And now for the Europe of Sovereign Nations Group, Mrs. Knafo Sarah.
Monsieur le Président, chers
Thank you, President. Colleagues, now, Gulag Archipelago was written by Solzhenitsyn, but he needed to leave his country to do that. Gandhi, for challenging British colonialism, was sent to prison. Now it's from Moscow. The leader of Telegram was arrested, but that was in France. It wasn't in Cuba. No, it's here in the Europe of Ursula von der Leyen. In Europe, the civilization that needs to protect freedom of expression. It was invented here. It is here that Europeans are muzzled and punished and silenced on social media, and they are harassed by banks and the police. Even in France, the C8 channel has also been banned. Young influencers are banned from Instagram without any explanation. It's in my country, the country of human rights, where the public media decides who and how we speak about people. Now, we need to respect opinions. The more you attack us, you can censor us, but you can't really censor us. We may not see it on TV, but we see it in the streets every day. You can't stop Europeans from thinking, from living. You can't stop Europeans from saying to you that we are not criminals. We are dissidents. We prefer Elon Musk to Ursula von der Leyen and freedom instead of censorship. Thank you.
Din partea PPE.
Thank you. For the EPP, Mr. Arias Echeverria.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner Visser, the DSA has a number of objectives, inter alia, regulating the digital market. The risk of illicit and fake information permeating all our inboxes is a very real one. We need to have accurate and fair information, and we need to make sure that we promote that and respect editorial independence of free media. At the same time, we do need to tackle fake news. Intergovernmental cooperation is there in order to bring us together so that we can come together to tackle these challenges and to eradicate manipulation. The project that has been put together by the Spanish government is at variance with the EU approach because it will actually operate against individuals who are investigative journalists and who are reporting on issues such as corruption or illicit acts suspected to be carried out by members of the government. Therefore, there are some inappropriate provisions in this legislation, and I would appeal to the Commission to make sure that the DSA works properly throughout the entire EU and the entire market. The Member States must not be allowed to have recourse to this legislation in order to control national media and to make biased decisions on what is truth, what is fake, what is lie, and what is fake. Therefore, it is time that we had proper regulation to enable journalists to do their work properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Mendes from Portugal for the S&D.
Muito obrigada, Sr. Presidente, Sra. Comissária.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, public opinion is aware of that there is a before and after new technologies, a before and after online platforms, and we all know how digital platform use jeopardizes democracy. And that is why throughout the years, the rules that set the limitations to telecoms have been amended and overhauled to reflect these changes. But we must remain steadfast to protecting freedom and privacy. Digital giants and users have never been on an equal footing, and that is why it's extremely important to have a DSA, but also an Artificial Intelligence Act, and we do have that. It was adopted on the 23rd of December, and according to this act, we will be protecting the freedom of citizens, but we will also be making sure that hoaxes and false information, fake news will not be promoted, because this would wreak irreparable damage to our societies. We are aware of the link between algorithms and content and platforms, and the fact that they are altering the democratic reality of our institutions. We cannot jeopardize our safeguards. We want freedom, but there has to be responsibility and accountability, both online and offline. And the European Union will have to continue choosing a path that protects privacy and freedom. That is why the European Union has to be a trailblazer and strike a balance between all these aspects. We have to respect safeguards and freedoms, and also, of course, help platforms, but we have to defend everything. Thank you.
Vă rog mult să vă încadrați.
I want to ask you to stick to your time. Mr. Shaler Baros now for the Patriots for Europe group.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner, the DSA from the EU is designed to make things more transparent online. It says that illegal content should be dealt with in certain ways on various websites. But when it comes to what is dangerous content, who decides that? And that's a very important question. Now, if we look at the initial experience of the DSA, unfortunately, there have been many errors. For example, we have seen the NGO sector affected. And there can be very serious consequences for this, because courts can decide whether a certain form of content is hate speech or whether it's fake news. But it's actually an international network based on NGOs that really come to that decision. So there are several concerns that we have with this DSA in the future. To what extent will it be able to ensure freedom of expression and freedom of speech in Europe? These are real concerns that I'd like to ask the Commissioner and the Commission to deal with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Denis Neshi for the ECR.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner, colleagues, the DSA came into effect and was welcomed as providing a high level of protection for users and consumers, for SMEs and startups alike. Potential abuses by big tech would be reined in. Arbitrary restrictions on freedom of expression and checks on public debate are, however, what has often happened in reality. I would refer you to Mr. Breton's publication of the letter on X. And even Ms. von der Leyen distanced herself from that. He invited the platform not to disseminate fake news and not to publish this interview with Trump by Elon Musk. All users are asking themselves now whether the Commission wants the DSA to protect against abuses or whether they intend it to become an instrument of abuse, such as it looks to be becoming now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Billy Keller for the Renew Group.
What is being broadcast and disseminated on X and other social media platforms is sowing seeds of disharmony in our union and sadly facilitating violence on our streets. Last month, violence erupted on the streets of Belfast in Ireland. It was encouraged and spurred on by the comments of the owner of X, Elon Musk. His comments were about civil war. I believe a deliberate attempt to ratchet up the rhetoric and antagonise people. As a Liberal, I will defend a person's right to freedom of speech, expression and their fundamental rights. However, as a Democrat, I cannot support the right of a person to incite hate or violence and undermine our democratic systems with misinformation and disinformation for nefarious motivation. This is the challenge we as parliamentarians face, to balance these too often competing objectives. We are not the United States. There are no First Amendment rights. There are no universal rights to freedom of speech. We need to be very careful in the weeks and months ahead that nefarious actors do not use social media platforms under the guise of free speech to undermine our democratic systems and cause violence and havoc on our streets. Finally, I want to wish Michael McGrath, my colleague from Ireland, the very best in his new appointment to the Commission, where he will be in charge of the European Democracy Shield, which is now more important than ever. Thank you very much.
Stimați colegi, am primit...
Dear colleagues, I've had several requests for the Catch the Eye. We are quite pressed by time. That's why I'm going to close the Catch the Eye procedure. We have 1 hour left, and according to the time that we will have left, I will see how many colleagues I can give the floor to. And now I give the floor to Mrs. Gregorova for the Greens.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, every European with an internet connection is exposed to the unregulated commercial surveillance-based social media. These trillion-dollar companies destroy our attention span, our democratic institutions and trust, and our mental health for a little profit. The DSA, as ambitious as it was in the beginning, has not shown its enforceable teeth yet. Our current legal framework must ultimately lead towards algorithmic transparency so that everyone can regain agency to what they are recommended online. Information technology is too important to be controlled exclusively by the rich and the intelligence agencies. The DSA and our framework of rules must set a path for a surveillance-free, private and secure way to take part in the online sphere. That is the goal, not unilateral decisions about individual imprisonments and attempts to surveil anyone and everyone, which would be directed to the Hungarian presidency if they were here. Thank you.
Mulțumesc. Următorul este...
Thank you. Mr. Fidias Panayotou.
I'm one of the most qualified members of the European Parliament to talk about social media platforms. As myself, I'm a social media influencer by profession. I believe the Digital Service Act is a positive step forward, but I want to focus more on not censorship. Instead, I will propose that we encourage the platforms to create organic fact-checking systems to inform their users about the validity of the information they receive. A good example of this is Community Notes of Twitter, which allows its users to highlight information when they believe that is factually incorrect. Now, in an era of artificial intelligence, more than ever, we need to focus on what is actually true, not by censoring, but just by letting people know the facts and freely decide.
Thank you. And now, Ms. Arbaco-Kalari for the EPP.
Tack, herr talman och kommissionär Vestager. Vi har fått på plats en historisk lag som
Thank you very much. This is a historic decision, and it clearly shows what the rules of the game are to make sure that tech giants can help us put an end to a whole set of illegal activities or harmful activities. So we can see how criminals in Sweden recruit through Snapchat, TikTok, and online. They're looking for minors in order to ask them to commit murders. So all of this is happening online, and sometimes it's crimes in Denmark that are being ordered. So, but this is cross-border crime that knows no borders. So at the moment, what is happening online represents part of what is being perpetrated by criminal gangs. I want to make sure that the new European Commission is going to force tech titans to respect the provisions in the EU, because the time has come to stop coming up with excuses. We have to deliver tangible results to put an end to online crime and criminal activities so that our online life can be safe and secure.
Doamna Christel Schaldemose.
Ms. Christel Schaldemose.
Even though we pay no entry fee to use social media, they come at a cost. And that cost is becoming too high for our society, our democracy, and our well-being. From all over the world, we hear calls for a safer and a fairer social media. Citizens, they call for social media to be free from disinformation, manipulative content, and foreign interference. Parents, they call for social media to be safe for the children to use without seeing harmful content. And users, they call for control over their own data. In the S&D group, we do hear those calls, and we answer those calls. Under the S&D leadership with the DSA, we won the first fight between lawmakers and social media, and we ended the Wild West online. For the first time, social media platforms in Europe, they are now liable for the algorithms. They must not become a megaphone for illegal content, for disinformation, or harm public health. But in order to make sure that this also is the real life out there, we call upon the Commission to really take on the role as the sheriff of this new online world. We really need to make sure that we use the tools we granted the Commission by the DSA. We need to make sure that we have a strong implementation and a strong enforcement. We need to make sure that our kids are safe. We need to make sure that our democracy is not destroyed. And I do think that we need to see the Commission to speed up the implementation and enforcement. And if you need more resources, we have to look at that. And I also think that it is important to say that if the DSA is not enough to make sure that we have a safe social media world, then we also need to be open to do more, for instance, to look at better rules around age verification. S&D, we hear the calls. We will keep on fighting to make sure that we can be safe online as we are offline. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On behalf of the Patriots for Europe, Mr. Sebastian Kreuz.
Ja, voorzitter, hartelijk bedankt.
Thank you, President. Elon Musk published an interview with former President Trump on X. The French Euro-communist Breton evidently saw reason to write to him threatening action unless this interview complied with his, that is, Breton's left-wing ideology. This was even before anything had been actually published. It was not on the platform, and surely it is only right for interviews with a candidate for the presidency to be published online anyway. This is how the left works, though. If you don't agree, then you're simply cancelled by the British bureaucrats. For example, the leader of the largest party in the Netherlands, Geert Wilders, has 24/7 security, which he has had for the last 20 years, because Islamic terrorists are out to murder him. The only freedom he retains is freedom of expression, and he doesn't even necessarily have that. It is not right that the European Commission should be trying to stifle and strangulate freedom of expression. And this is why, Ms. Vestager, I'm asking you, which side of this debate are you actually on? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sipper. We have a blue card, but you're also on the Catch the Eye list. So it's either or. not both. Okay, we're going on with our list with Mrs. Lotowski-Kosma.
Panie Przewodniczący, Pani Komisarz, media społecznościowe to...
Thank you. Madam Commissioner, social platforms are public agoras of the modern times. People exchange views, but there's also disinformation and hybrid warfare. We wanted to better regulate the internet to better protect users' rights, but we had unclear rules, and we wanted to put an end to that. But content was being blocked, accounts were being closed without justification. We cannot agree with everything here because this text is being used within the context of a political battle. European rules are being used as a pretext to meddle in elections. We cannot allow this to happen once again. The EU cannot take the same path as non-democratic countries or dictatorships where there is censorship and limited access to the internet, where protecting citizens' rights just protects powers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sandro Gozzi.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, cher.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to talk about X, formerly Twitter. Because of the drastic cuts to their teams, X is no longer in a position to respect the DSA and to efficiently moderate crises such as what happened at Capitol Hill or the recent riots in the UK. Instead of curtailing them, they have just sped everything up. And we can see, or research shows, that X algorithms just act as a soundbox. Users are exposed to polarizing content, which is often violent. This is an editorial choice, a clear one. X isn't just a neutral platform anymore, but an editorial board. And, of course, this means that Elon Musk has to understand that he is legally liable and responsible for this. Thank you very much.
Ms. Kim van Swarentak.
Thank you, President. Dear Commissioner, big social media platforms have become our main space for public debate. And because we did nothing for a very long time, the algorithms of a few powerful, money-hungry corporations are now the referees of this debate. And their only goal is to keep us online as long as possible. But last year, the DSA entered into force, and we hoped we would see a big change. That content deemed too queer wouldn't be taken down without notice. That harmful disinformation wouldn't be spread all over the place, and people would no longer be dragged into extreme content. But this is what makes these companies the most money, so we hardly see any change. We clearly need to strengthen the DSA, starting with the Code of Practice on Disinformation. It needs to be more concrete and enforceable. And let's finally tackle the recommender systems that are based on clicks and interaction, because they suck people into swamps of radical content, disinformation and misogyny. And the Parliament has been clear. The next priority for the new Commission has to present new rules on addictive design. Let's do what we can to safeguard our children, our people, our societies and our democracies. Thank you.
Mulțumesc. Nu-l văd în sală pe domnul.
Thank you. I don't see the next speaker in the room, so we pass.
Este?
Is he in the room?
Vice President, Commissioner, colleagues. A Digital Services Act, a fair digital market is not fair. This is why we adopted this act and we went a step further. We want to protect our children. This is why we banned targeted advertising. We also defined the obligation to the large companies to check the products they're offering on their web pages. With this act, we got a tool to prevent the spread of false information in information. Foreign forces can use the platforms to spread the false information, and we witness that every day. However, we have to be careful not to limit the freedom of speech, especially with those who do not share your political ideologies. DSA should not be used as a censor tool to those who think in a different way. So we should find the right balance between the two.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Nice.
So in order to avoid these bad consequences, we have to work on the right implementation. This is why we have to create a DSA team in every member state. Colleagues, after its entry into force, we have to ensure its proper application and in that way protect the users on the internet.
Thank you, Mr. Sokol, and I do apologize. You did have 1 minute and a half, not 1 minute.
Thank you very much, President. Now, with this system, what about censorship in the future? Now we have apparently official media. The founder of Telegram, to protect his own social network, was arrested not in Russia but in France. And Elon Musk, who's the owner of X, is not threatened by the president of China or Putin. No, it was the European Commission. The DCA seeks to decide what is real and what is fake news. It's not about just fighting disinformation. What they want to be able to censor profiles and take legal action. Now, it is a European Soviet digital union against the European values that we'd like to respect here. Yes, it's true we need to have tools to discern what is fake news and what isn't. But with community notes, for example, yes, but we can't have people's digital businesses being eliminated because of misinformation.
I'm sorry, you've long gone over your time. And now, Mrs. Laura Bayarin Ceresa, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Vice President. Señorías,
Ladies and gentlemen, does the freedom of expression mean encouraging lynchings of immigrants or the fake accusation of murder of a child, such as the person who's just spoken, what he said, or is it about fake theories of electoral fraud or on vaccines, for example? Now, we shouldn't say that freedom of expression, what is actually totalitarianism. On social media, the far right has found the perfect way of spreading fake news, and they have various objectives. First of all, they want to put an end to our democracy from within. They want to turn public spaces into spaces full of hate and lies. Secondly, they want to spread a campaign of hate against immigrants. They want to link crime to place of origin, and they want to encourage systematic violence against women with deep fakes. They want to silence us online. Thanks to algorithms, social media have become a place where they sow male chauvinism, and racism, for example. But we can see that in Brazil that we're being supported.
It's a cancer to our democracies. But we Europeans, we said enough. Meta, TikTok, this is also about you. We will continue to investigate and punish every illegality you permit, and of course you commit. We already set up a vaccine, a shield, to protect our democracy and from the disinformation pandemic, the Digital Service Act, because there is no freedom in the fake news, There is no freedom in hate and violence. In Europe, there is no freedom without rules. But we won't stop here. We ask the international organisms to promote global standards, to hold you accountable everywhere, and to stop this hate spiral. We remain vigilant. The law of the jungle online is finally over. Thank you very much.
Mulțumesc. Domnule Perez Alvise.
Thank you, Mr. Perez Alvise. I cannot give you the floor because you went 30 seconds past your speaking time. So I give the floor to Mr. Van den Driesche.
Voorzitter, collega's.
President, colleagues, I warned 2 years ago that what is happening now was coming down the tracks. The European Union is threatening freedom of expression in social media and is thereby threatening the very fundaments of our democracy. The Digital Services Act was presented as an attempt to protect, to enhance safety, but now the truth will out and we can see exactly what was behind it: censorship and control. The European Union is trying to determine what is truth, what citizens are allowed to say, what they're allowed to hear, what they're allowed to see. You're not allowed to criticise mass migration, for example. That's derided as hate speech. You're not allowed to deny that climate change exists. You're called a climate denier. The DSA is simply being used to repress, and those in positions of power now aspire to remain in power, and in order to do that, they need to ensure that they can control what is said and what gets into the media, written or online. Is this genuinely democracy? What genuine democrat is actually afraid of freedom of expression? For Vlaams Belang, we feel that freedom of expression has to be as extensive as possible. If things are illegal offline, of course, they must be illegal online, but nothing more than that. Thank you.
Tobias.
Thank you. Tobias Buchensky, 1 minute.
Freedom of speech is a cornerstone of Western civilization. Our ancestors fought for it with or against oligarchs, tyrants, and other enemies of freedom. Today we see that this freedom is again under siege. But enemies have new names: political correctness, hate speech, and government control. There is no freedom where bureaucrats can decide how debate looks like. We have to prepare legislation to protect our freedom because it's now endangered by the European Commission's arbitrary power. We don't want to live in the world depicted by George Orwell in his famous book, Year 1984. Unfortunately, there are no legal restraints to European Commission's arbitrary power. One of the greatest means of protection against arbitrary power is freedom of speech. To fight for it is
Domnule Bohenski, ați
our
depășit
moral
timpul.
and political obligation. Okay. The enemies of freedom are always the same.
Mulțumim, trebuie să continuăm dezbaterea. Mulțumesc.
The President interrupts the speaker. We must continue the debate. You've went over your speaking time. I now give the floor to Mrs. Zichrova.
Thank you. Je rok 2024 a na
Thank you. Let's imagine.
În anul 2024
a bez akýchkoľvek následkov.
Are on social media. Now, there's no way to see what anyone sees and consumes on a daily basis. Now, we cannot have misleading business practices managing the world. We cannot have a world where fake news are...
Connect, create and enjoy. And owing to the EU and the DSA, we now have a tool to make this business the way we all want it, to make it fair. The decisions of a single person should not have undue influence, and the power of algorithms cannot be placed above facts. I stand here today to assure you that when it comes to what happens online, we will use the same tactics that the social media companies often use on our citizens, strict ones. But unlike theirs, ours will be fair. Thank you.
Doherty, Regina.
Thank you, Mrs. Regina Doherty.
Commissioner, only 2 weeks ago, a survey of over 7,000 school children in Ireland showed that over a quarter of them had been impacted by harmful content online, including harassment, direct contact by strangers and exposure to unsolicited content. And as a mother to 4 young people, that fills me with real fear and dread. And this is one of the reasons why the Digital Services Act was introduced, to protect our youngest and our most vulnerable citizens. The laws aim to achieve an important but simple principle. What is illegal offline should be illegal online. And it also extends to misusing somebody's personal data, content promoting incitement or hatred or terrorism, or indeed undermining our democracy. So, in my view, it's the root of this must include tackling the algorithms that promote the content that we abhor and that we see daily. And while the Act has been in place now for a number of months, I think it's too early yet to judge its effectiveness. But right now, it's absolutely vital that we ensure all of our local individual enforcement authorities across every member state, including Commissioner Mann in Ireland, are fully resourced, both financially and with personnel, to do the job that we want them to do. So no more should the online space be a Wild West for safety and data rights. However, there is a fine line. We have to be clear, the online and digital economy offers huge benefits, and it is an indispensable part of our modern economy and society. And that's why, seeking to uphold the law, we must not smother innovation, creativity or competitiveness. Europe must be a place where digital industries can grow, develop and compete. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brando Benifei.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. The DSA hands over responsibility to us, and it protects citizens from fake news by curtailing the action of online platforms. The European Commission has done very important work, but we still have our work cut out for us. But if Trump isn't happy, then that indicates we're on the right track. The member states that safeguard privacy are also taking the same path. So targeted advertising that targets minors isn't allowed. But we have to go further. We have to also look at the Artificial Intelligence Act. And thanks to this, that we can also look at what is happening, and we also have clear labeling of what is created by AI to protect from deep fakes. We need to protect from disinformation, and we need to protect our future, and this is valid not only in Europe but around the world.
Thank you. Mr. Bushade Villalba.
Thank you very much. In Spain, Sanchez government has invoked the DSA as a basis for muzzling critical media in Spain, saying that disinformation is undermining freedom of expression. But in fact, the only people that are actually affected by corruption and threatening democracy are the people affected by Sanchez's own corruption and what his wife is doing. And we have to rely on the judges. In the previous legislature, there was a great deal of corruption and repression. When Sanchez says he's going to protect democracy and protect the freedom of citizens, what he is doing to effect that is, in fact, the last nail in the coffin of real freedom and real democracy. Individuals from the UK have been detained, and because Elon Musk interviewed Donald Trump and was made so bold as to publish this on X. He has been censured. Lula in Brazil has clamped down on X. Where is this going to stop? Do you have no shame? Do you not realize that you can't just say that Twitter is a cancer when we all know here in Europe that it's socialism that is the cancer? We all know that 1984 was written thinking in a prophetic way of how the European Commission would come together to conspire against the freedom of the citizens. But we, as patriots, we will stand up forever in freedom.
Thank you. Madame Trochu-Laurence.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Commissioner. Now, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and we want to respond to legitimate concerns via the DSA fighting crime, terrorism and disinformation. But the DSA, unfortunately, focuses on political censorship, and in France, Meta arbitrarily closed various accounts. They were temporarily suspended with any objective explanation, and they used the DSA as a pretext to transform the state under the rule of law. And it's a pretext for an increasingly arrogant, present, arbitrary form of censorship. Now, we will be protecting the freedom of expression in Europe.
Thank you. And now, Madame Stéphanie Yoncourtin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President. Madam Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, a week ago, the US billionaire that owns X, Elon Musk, appealed to Europe and said that we must get rid of useless laws. Of course, the DSA seems to him too complicated to respect. Yes, Mr. Musk, this is like an image of Chernobyl. It doesn't end at European borders. We have to fight against the contaminating disinformation. It doesn't end at the borders. What is illegal offline should be illegal online. We see millions of European citizens dealing with this, and we see harmful content being amplified. There's radicalization. We've seen what's happened with the Middle East conflict, the US elections, and the riots in the UK last summer. There's a Baroque alliance of Americans together with patriots that are patriots only in name, and we have to regulate the online world. And those who believe in conspiracy theories, I appeal to you, ask yourself the following questions. Would you like your children to see this kind of content on billboards when they're going to school on our streets?
Carlo Ressler.
Mr. Carlo Ressler.
Povjerenice, kolegice I kolege. Novi digitalni alati.
Colleagues, new digital tools have fundamentally changed our everyday lives. While online platforms come with exceptional opportunities for bettering our lives, economies and democracies, they also harbor new dangers. The DSA is one of the most significant efforts to modernize European policies in the digital domain. The online world is what we try to make safer with this DSA, and the platforms have gained higher legal security, but they also need to take responsibility. Now we need to ensure a good application of the new rules in partnership with all the stakeholders. The deep processes of social and digital transformations go beyond our borders. Europe, with these new rules, has shown that it can take the lead when it comes to building a society which is centered around the well-being of people. We must not choose between fundamental rights and boosting our economy and the right to information or freedom of speech. We need to achieve everything, all these values.
colleagues, therefore, I think it is really no dilemma that today in Europe it is possible, despite the digital revolution, to aspire for a better democracy, for higher pluralism, for a society that will be fit for the challenges of the new era.
Timo Wölken.
Thank you, Mr. Timo Wölken.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, sehr geehrte Frau Kommissarin, liebe
President, Commissioner, colleagues, during the last Parliament, we discussed the Digital Services Act and at length, and we also decided to adopt all this legislation on protection of online expression. But we have put in place clear sanctions, and these need to be applied by courts if necessary, not by the online services themselves. That's how we interpret the rule of law in the digital arena. And the Digital Services Act is a big success in that respect. But what we need to do is ensure that it is implemented proportionately and properly. And it shouldn't be a case that an outgoing commissioner gets into some spat with Elon Musk and imposes arbitrary deadlines. That's not in conformity with the law. What we do need is consistent implementation so that the digital giants who have such sway over democracy are actually held to account. And the new Commission needs to do a lot better than Commissioner Breton. But I have every confidence in them. I'm sure they will. Thank you.
Domnul Haider.
Thank you, Mr. Haider. Roman now.
Stärkung der Rolle des
If we want to reinforce the DSA and protect democracy in the online, well, that is the title of today's debate. Now, the DSA is an art of censorship. You can't possibly say there's anything to do with protecting freedom and democracy. No, this is almost... We are not protecting freedom and democracy online. It's actually being destroyed. This is one of the most authoritarian rules in the history of the EU. Completely undefined facts or concepts such as hate speech or disinformation. And this report is a slap in the face of the rule of law. Now, does the Commission seriously want to tackle freedom and democracy or disinformation? Then really you'd need to abolish this law. Freedom of expression is a thorn in your side. Thank you.
Domnul Stefan.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stefano Cavedagna.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. The DSA, the Digital Services Act, had the aim to curtail abuse carried out by big companies and damage to citizens and web users. However, in too many cases, we spotted that under the guise of stopping the spread of disinformation and stopping fake news, this was being used to muzzle all those who expressed certain views, views that, according to those in government, were not appropriate. And now we've seen that Commissioner Breton sent a letter a few weeks ago to Elon Musk of X in order to muzzle Donald Trump. We're going to fight for freedom of expression. We will always do so, including in this House.
Cynthia Nivorhu.
Thank you. Mrs. Cynthia Nivorhu.
Monsieur President, Madam Commissioner Vestager, fellow MEPs, let's get real here. In the real world, outside of the Brussels bubble, the Digital Services Act versus tech giants is akin to David versus Goliath. It's regulation versus profit-hungry rebels. The Goliath tech giants devour regulations and self-regulation and compliance for their breakfast. They thrive on enforcement and self-regulation because they know it's slow, cumbersome and full of red tape. In the meantime, friends, the Goliath tech giants have made millions. They have robbed our children of their childhood. They have swindled our old age pensioners out of their savings for their holidays. And they have organised our citizens to hate, to maim and to kill. That means, quite simply, lives are lost. I say enough is enough. You and me and us as MEPs, we need to legislate for robust laws and fast laws. That means interim and interlocutory suspensions and injunctions. We need to be rapid, and especially we need criminal sanctions for those directors of the tech giants. That will temper the tech
Mulțumesc, ați
giants.
depășit timpul. Mulțumesc.
Thank you. The President interrupts the speaker.
Mulțumesc,
Thank you. Mrs. Salla Aura.
Commissioner, colleagues, as far as we see, a lot of ongoing work by the enforcement of the DSA is progressing well and shows a serious commitment to protecting and empowering users online by requiring platforms to assess, mitigate and act against their systemic risks and to provide the right content moderation tools to do so, as well as clear information to users of possible misbehaviours. This shows that the DSA can work well, but that is only the case when things are done correctly. This is not a tool for preventing something that might be said. Nothing should endanger freedom of speech. Politicising the enforcement of the DSA is an incredibly dangerous thing to do. The DSA is designed to uphold the rights of millions of Europeans by addressing systemic risks. It is not a tool for censorship, and abusing it in this manner will defeat the purpose of the law. Instead, the Commission needs to keep working to fine-tune enforcement so it works as uniformly and efficiently as possible in all Member States. This has to be evidence-based and process-focused. In this House, we are closely following the impact of the law and if we need to review some of its elements in the future. Thank you.
mulțumesc, domnul Asiș.
Thank you, Mr. Assis Francisco.
Senhora Comissária, a regulação.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, the regulation applying to social media is something very important to us. It's a pillar of protecting our democracy. Social media, when it is untrammeled, actually threatens the very fundamentals of our democracy, and this is the case at a global level. Europe has been in the vanguard. It has tackled this anarchy, this Wild West, which many have actually actively sought to create out there in the digital world. The apologists for autocrats invoke any kind of cynical excuse to close down freedom of expression and to question the requirement that they need to take down unacceptable information. There are those who have actually done everything that they can to stand up against the attacks on the rule of law, on the state. For example, we have seen what happened in Brazil in relation to Elon Musk and the Supreme Court. It has become clear that a big country, a big state such as Brazil, has had to stand up robustly against Elon Musk, and we should be inspired by that. Thank you.
Isabella.
Thank you, Ms. Isabella Tovaglieri.
Con la scusa di proteggere la
With the excuse of protecting democracy, Brussels has introduced the Chinese model in Europe, curtailing freedom of expression and criticism. You have painted the DSA as safeguarding users' rights, and a few days later, a video of mine was taken offline, where I very politely talked about issues relating to Erasmus and money be used to promote LGBT rights and so on. So that meant that these uncomfortable truths were taken offline, removing my right to inform citizens, and more importantly, putting an end to the right of citizens to get information. You're muzzling us. You're muzzling your political foes. And you're imposing the dictatorship of single thought, knowing that that is the real enemy of democracy and freedom.
Thank you. Mr. Bartolica Stefan.
Thank you, colleagues. The new Digital Services Act gives the European Commission new authorities that are unprecedented. Here we are faced with new traps, and there is a lot of opportunity for the abuse of power of the censor who can control what people can or cannot say. We cannot destroy democracy in order to protect it. Will, for example, the Holy Script be something that will be categorized as hate speech when it is quoted? This opens up opportunities of different interpretations. So there is a great danger that ordinary people will not be able to express what they think. We need to learn from totalitarian regimes that unfortunately Europe has been faced with in the past. We therefore do not accept this new Digital Services Act because it harbors a lot of dangers.
Groothuis.
Thank you, Mr. Groothuis.
Thank you, Chair, the Commissioner, colleagues. Since 2017, the Chinese state can demand from any Chinese company to help execute Chinese offensive espionage operations abroad and its operations to influence elections abroad. 150 million, mainly young Europeans, installed the Chinese app TikTok. Its algorithms help them to decide what to like, what to trust, and who to vote for. TikTok engineers in China decide what the trends are in Europe, in fashion and music, but also in politics. What could possibly go wrong, dear colleagues? Well, of course, first, Chinese espionage can be enabled on a device, and second, our elections can be influenced by the Chinese state. So what to do? First, this Parliament should take its task seriously and set up a serious hearing of TikTok's top executives on whether the TikTok app has a place in our democratic union. Secondly, when politicians like ourselves decide to use TikTok, don't just reach out to those 150 million young voters, but also use the TikTok app to stand up against the Communist Party in China, its ideology and misbehaviors, or else we are complacent to autocratic censorship ourselves. Thank you.
Doamna Gasiuk.
Mrs. Gasiuk-Piovic, Kamila.
Koledzy, dzisiaj młodzi ludzie głównie czerpią wiedzę z social mediów. To jest także dla nich podstawowe.
Thank you. Social media is where people make contacts and they create networks, but there are significant challenges. In Poland, around 40% of teenagers have been targeted by cyber violence because of their physical appearance, and this has horrendous repercussions for their mental health. We cannot have social media that goes uncontrolled. We see barbaric, extremist behavior. We need to combat violation and the suffering of many young people, because behind hate there is often a significant impunity. We need to put an end to that impunity, and cyber violence needs to be, online violence needs to be seen as another form of violence. The European Commission needs to do its work, and it needs to enforce the DSA, imposing sanctions on the platforms which allow these kinds of practices. We need to react more swiftly, because this affects millions of young people. As an MEP and a mother of 2 children, I call on the European Commission to make proposals which will allow us to have the tools at our disposal to fight this epidemic of hate and this epidemic of aggression. That is our duty.
Thank you. Ms. Vice President Katarina Barley.
Thank you very much, President. Once again, we are hearing reports about how Russia is trying to undermine our continent with fake news. Telegram, Instagram, Face and TikTok are full of fake information which is being disseminated throughout Germany in a deliberate attempt to strengthen right-wing parties and to make the people insecure. Social media can be a real catalyst in disseminating hate speech and disinformation and fake news. This has nothing to do with freedom of information. It's targeted fake news, and we can't close our eyes to this. The internet is a valuable forum for exchange of information, and it shouldn't just become a dumping place for lies where democracy drowns in the swamp. We need to do better. We need to regulate social media so that we can protect our citizens and they can...
Thank you. Ms. Catherine Griset.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Madame. Thank you very much, President. Madam Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, over the last few months, social network censorship has intensified, affecting Instagram and others. The left is at the origin of 80% of these and also harnesses capitalism of connivance. If we want to remove illegal content to protect us, we need to protect freedom of expression. Before Musk bought Twitter, censorship affected the right. We saw this recently when Instagram was censored by clamping down on right-wing accounts. This weakens our society and our democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, a Europe without freedom of expression is a Europe of regression.
Thank you. Mr. Adrian Axinia. Thank you, President. Censorship and political control of ideas in social media, defined as a public space, controlled by decisions of the ECJ and of national courts, these are incompatible with democracy. We must not fight disinformation with censorship, but with information. Commissioner Thierry Breton's unjustified intervention in the situation with Elon Musk and Donald Trump should have led to his being fired. But okay, he resigned now because he didn't accept Ms. von der Leyen's rule. But we do notice anti-democratic tendencies in all member states. I want to give you the example of Romania, where the Secret Service said that they do directly control what happens at the on social networks, and nobody did anything. And the Liberal Party, part of the government, saying that they want to protect children, they want to censor online platforms and to annul anonymity on the internet. Mr. Moritz Körner.
President, colleagues, Commissioner. Today we're talking a lot about X, Twitter, and Elon Musk, and then letters that are often posted on X, and then there are disputes with Elon Musk. I think we should look at what's happening on TikTok with our young people and less at what's happening with Elon Musk, because TikTok is an app from China. And according to a study from Rutgers University, content which is critical of the Chinese government or support for Ukraine is being restricted on TikTok. And this is a huge risk for our societies. TikTok is being used more and more to radicalize young people. So I therefore call on the Commission to tackle this and to ensure that there is transparency in algorithms on these apps via the DSA, because the Americans are actually a little bit ahead of us on that.
Zala. Thank you. Ms. Zala Tomasic.
Pozdravljam zaščito uporabnikov na socialnih omrežjih in brez dvoma je, da morajo platforme poskrbeti.
Thank you. Online users have to be protected against dangerous information being uploaded. In 60 seconds on the internet, 180 different separate uploads full of pornography can be found. And this is only one tiny example. In recent times, ever more frequently, this type of thing is happening. Having said that, too often disinformation is invoked for purposes of censorship. We can't tolerate this. We don't have any reason to accept disinformation. We need to protect our democracies, but nor can we accept censorship. The solution is to ensure that any kind of fake profiles are removed from online. Any kind of anonymity online simply plays into the hands of those who are trying to disseminate fake news. We've also got to tackle cyberbullying. Everybody needs to be accountable for what they say.
Thank you. Mr. Pierre-Jouvet.
Monsieur le Président,
President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, I was hoping to have a discussion on the role of platforms, disinformation, and the impact on our democracies. AI challenges, the challenges linked to deregulating online platforms and opaque algorithms should make us act more quickly. But since yesterday, I've been very worried. Yes, I'm worried. Where is Mr. Breton? Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen, helped by the historic weakness of Emmanuel Macron, decided that the next EU commissioner responsible for digital issues would be called Elon Musk. I'm almost disappointed that Mr. Musk isn't here during our debate, because this is the umpteenth submission to private interests at a time when we should actually be beefing up regulation. Mrs. von der Leyen has taken advantage of the political weakness of Emmanuel Macron in order to impose a commissioner that is servile to platform interests. Instead of submitting ourselves to X and others, we should make sure that we are masters of our own destiny.
Vasconcelos Ana.
Mrs. Vasconcelos.
Commissioner and colleagues, social media can liberate the voice of otherwise silenced individuals and spread old and new ideas. It also enables threats to the life and physical integrity of individuals, as well as deliberate attempts to undermine our democratic systems. Child abuse, encouraging violence on our streets, fake political endorsements, algorithms and bots who are not people that deliberately promote agendas while suppressing contrasting views are a few examples that we cannot ignore. The DSA took an important step in demanding transparency and accountability mechanisms of very large online platforms. Individuals must be empowered with tools of assessing credible information. Now, fighting disinformation does not excuse restricting free speech in the way we just saw in Brazil. A full ban on a platform for refusing to take down a few accounts is a disproportionate, illiberal measure only seen until now in autocracies. Democracies face threats by standing up for what sets them apart and not by imitating autocracies. Thank you.
Mulțumesc. Doamna Maria Grapini.
Thank you. Maria Grapini.
Doamna comisar, stimați colegi.
Commissioner, colleagues, it is sad that we are witness to fake news. Colleagues from the extreme right have named this document that we've worked on so much as being censorship, even though the Commissioner has said from the very beginning that there is no moderation of content through the DSA. As Vice President of the Committee for the Internal Market, I know this document very well, and I tell you with all my conviction that either have you not read the document, or you are disseminating fake news, as you did in your own countries, in order to be elected. By this regulation, in fact, we want to eliminate illegal activities and the dissemination of disinformation, which disturbs elections and values in any European country and in the European Union. So for me, it is sad to see that today, when we should be discussing about how we're going to apply this in a uniform manner in all member states so that children no longer die, there were children who committed suicide as a consequence of fake information. Women were raped, people were murdered for money. So dear colleagues, read before you speak. Thank you very much. Thank you. And the last on the list is Mr. Dibrani. And then we move on to the catch the eye procedure. We have a few colleagues who participated in the debate.
Tack, herr talman. Sociala medier.
Thank you very much, President. Social media is here to stay. One Swedish newspaper carried out a study among young people and children, and it asked them to what are they exposed to in the digital world, and they said violence, war, rape, etc. I'm not only a legislator, I am the father of 2 children, aged 7 and 9, and I am concerned about the algorithms used by these systems. We need a strong European Union. We need fathers and mothers who take on their responsibility, and we also need tools which allow us to combat these algorithms. So I'd like to ask, what are we going to do to ensure the well-being of our young people and children so that their future is not destroyed by these strange, awful things that they are exposed to on social media now?
Thank you. As I was telling you, we have a few colleagues that requested to intervene in the Catch the Eye. And we start with Mr. Lopez Aguilar. You have 1 minute to speak at your seat.
Aguilar.
Gracias, señor presidente, comisario.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Vestager, why is the right wing doing so well in EU member states, in countries with solid social cohesion? Part of the reply is because of what is happening with social networks that have algorithms that spread fake news and lies, as well as male chauvinism, denial, and others. This is their business model. And it means that social networks are a political communication tool and language that serves the interests of the owners. That is why we needed a DSA, the DSA that we adopted, and we need the Commission to make sure that it's respected. There have to be obligations and responsibilities imposed on online platforms that need to deal with the fact that the values of the European Union are being dealt a blow. That is why the DSA have to make sure that all of this is in the interest of values.
Thank you. Mr. Veriga Aurelius, please, colleagues, be quiet.
Veriga.
Thank you, Mr. President. The discussions are complicated. I think we all agree that digital platforms should not spread ideas related to violence. We should also seek to restrict Russian propaganda. But at the same time, many of us remember the life under circumstances when you are subjected to censorship, when somebody decides for you who is right, what is right and what is wrong. Sometimes we are talking about good intentions, the necessity to protect children, but we're also introducing censorship. Yes, we need to protect children, but at the same time we should not deny reality. Sometimes children are being told that they can change their sex. Some other ideas are spread. I don't think we should do.
Thank you. Mr. Luis Vincencio Lazaros.
Da. Mulțumesc, domnule președinte, dragi colegi.
Thank Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, from our point of view, things are very simple. I noticed that the DSA and other warnings, resolutions and documents, by these, the European Commission tries to turn into a sort of police of the truth. Let us not turn, dear friends, these opinions into truths. Because this is a problem of meaning. An opinion is one thing and the truth is another thing. If you want to moderate something, then you can say that this is an opinion and that is a truth. Do not mix concepts in order to take the right to censor truth. So I am asking you, who are these fact-checkers that you are talking about, that they will establish what is truth and what is not true? These are some people coming from, maybe from the right, maybe from the center, and we talk about the right as being the extreme right. Why is it extreme? Because its representatives love their country. Is it a bad thing to love your country? This is not an extreme thing. Is it bad to speak the truth? Thank you, thank you. Your minute has lapsed. Thank you. Mrs. Sunčana Glavak. Ms. Glavak, you are in the front row. I'm sorry. Ms. Glavak is not with us, it seems.
Predsjedavajući, kolegice I kolege,
Vice President, chairs. The social platforms change our way of communication and of participation in a democratic process. With this act, we want to protect our citizens from illegal activities, and we don't want to limit the freedom of speech. I'm saying this because even here today we heard a lot of disinformation. Digital Services Act is a way to create a safer online space while protecting democratic values. I'm going to share data for you. According to European Commission data, 83% of citizens were confronted with disinformation on the internet. This makes it clear that we have to strengthen our sovereignty when it comes to digital world. Also, fake information have 70% more chances to be sent further. And these are the things that can endanger our democracy. Finally, I call on the new Commission to sanction those who are violating our rules.
Domnul Sipăr Lucas.
Thank you. And the last speaker in this part of the session is Mr. Sipăr. Please speak from your seat.
Dear people of Europe, you might not know me. My name is Lucas Sipăr. I'm 27 years old. Therefore, I'm one of the very, very few digital natives in this room. I grew up in both worlds, in the digital and the analog one. I illegally downloaded movies and music when I was a child. I was scammed by online shops. I am watching democracy and the rights of all of us being targeted by fake news and hate speech. I understand all of this, but I have no idea about the technical details. With all due respect, dear colleagues, I think most of the people in this room have even less of an idea regarding the digital realm, regarding the technical details. So here's my plea. Listen to the people who know. Listen to the experts and don't play political games while shaping this digital world of ours. Thank you very much.
Mulțumesc, domnule Sipăr. Margaret.
Thank you, Mr. Sipăr. Margaret, you have listened to us with much patience. You have the floor to conclude this debate for 5 minutes in the name of the European Commission. Margaret Vestager.
I think one of the central questions of this debate was, what side are you on? I'm on the side of democracy. And that was the impulse, that was the guiding star of the work done by this Parliament in approving the Digital Services Act. Thank you for this very strong debate. Thank you for not just saying that was just another piece of legislation passed. Now let the Commission do their enforcement work. Because that shows how essential it is for the legitimacy of a Parliament to be true online and offline, because this is what the Digital Services Act is about. The Digital Services Act do not regulate online content. Full stop. The Digital Services Act does not say something about what you can post. What it says is that platforms need to have systems in place to take down what is illegal, decided by the relevant parliaments in Europe. That is what it says. It is so far from censorship that it can possibly be. And that is a political game that puts our children's mental health at risk, because that prevents us from holding companies responsible for the safety of their products. Who would give their child a feeding bottle with substances in it that would change their hormones? Nobody. So it's equally important that the services that we use, they're not damaging to our mental health. And the Digital Services Act do rightfully give that responsibility to large platforms. Your products cannot be damaging, neither to mental health nor to our democracy, the things that we hold dear. So the Commission cannot censor. Of course we wouldn't, but also we can't, because the Digital Services Act do not regulate online content. So it's about the system, to set it up. It's the obligation to have resources to have such a system. And it's about enabling people whose post may be taken down because it's thought to be illegal, actually to protest against that, to say, I want my right. And you can post harmful content, but you do not have a right for an algorithm to amplify that. That is not your right. And that is fair. So the only thing that we're asking of companies where we enforce, and they are numerous because they do not comply, numerous of those companies. This is why we have the cases on X, on TikTok, on Instagram, in order to make sure that the decision of this Parliament is being respected. This is the work of the Commission. No rogue companies putting mental health, democracy, or the integrity of our elections at stake. This is what this Parliament asked of the Commission. This is what we're thriving at. We are not at the end of this process, but we are getting started, and it is going to work. Because this piece of legislation holds dear and builds on the value of this union, the rule of law, due process. I am really proud to have been part of this process, proud to have been part of the enforcement of this, the successful enforcement of this important piece of legislation. I hope that you will watch over it. I hope that you will ask for sufficient resources for this to happen, because what is at stake is the legitimacy of Parliament to take decisions about what is legal and what is illegal, and protect our minors so that they can grow up to be true democrats. Thank you very much for this strong debate.
Mulțumesc, doamna comisar. Mulțumesc.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, dear colleagues, for abiding by the time for European democracy. I want to thank you. This is the first time I chair this forum. On my behalf and on behalf of Romanians, I want to thank you. And now we will listen to the address by Mr. Mario Draghi.